Hello, writers. Come write with me. My name is Michaela Greenwood. I create roles from individuals. Welcome to my channel, Write with Michaela. I'm very glad to have you here on my channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the bell so you can go on this journey with me. Today we're going to discuss a few terms. The terms are Cusp Pontificate Propagate and Profundity. Let's look at cusp. Cusp means a point of transition between two different states. A second definition is a pointed end where two curves meet, and that definition is used in architecture, anatomy, and mathematics. And also each of the pointed ends of a crescent moon. A third definition is for astrology, and that is the initial point of an astrological sign or house, like at the end of Aries or the end of Aries just before Taurus. So, like March 22nd is, I think, tomorrow, and that would be the next, I think that's when Aries starts. Right now we're in Pisces, and Aries starts. It's usually the 20th, 21st, somewhere in there, that is the end. So that would be another definition. So the initial point of an astrological sign, right at the end of Aries, just before Taurus. So, while all of that is fascinating, we will concentrate on the first definition, which is a point of transition. Between two different states. The cusp of battle would be something in a story, meaning you hadn't entered battle yet, but were in place and waiting for a signal. The cusp of solving the mystery would be having most of the clues, but without the final clue. It would be hard to piece things together without that final clue. The cusp of dawn would be describing the setting in the early morning. If your story included students in school, then a student could be on the cusp of failing or the cusp of passing. In these examples, you see that you are at a point right at or just before the change. If you launch rockets in your story, then you could be at the cusp of a launch. If your story is science fiction, then your characters could be at the cusp of entering an unknown galaxy. This is a useful term or idea, and it is helpful to describe things just before the transition and after, so your readers enjoy the two different states, where they can at least feel the energy before and after the change. You know, if you're on the cusp of battle, you might be a little nervous and stuff, and you're just waiting. But then once battle happens, your training kicks in, and you're in full battle mode. So you have those two different states. Leave a comment on how you felt when you were on the cusp of graduating high school or college, or on the cusp of marriage. That's two different states, single, married. In Stargate, they were often on the cusp of exploring a whole new world. They would be in the military compound, the wormhole would form, and then they walked through the wormhole into the new world. And there was no telling what they would find. Often they sent a probe to get a sense, but that wasn't 100%. Leave a comment on a show, book, or movie that does a good job of describing two different states, or being on the cusp of one going into the other. Our next term is pontificate. Pontificate means to express one's opinions in a way considered annoyingly pompous and dogmatic. Well, I thought the other day to do pompous as a vocabulary word, but I haven't. So let's take a short side trip and get that definition. Pompous means effectively and irritatingly grand, solemn, or self-important. So a pompous person usually thinks he or she knows everything, Now, let's redefine pontificate, because that's the term we're looking at. It means to express one's opinions in a way considered annoyingly self-important and dogmatic. A second definition is for the Roman Catholic Church. That means to officiate as bishop, especially in Mass. I don't think we're going to use that definition so much. You can write about anything. But let's look at some synonyms for the first definition of pontificate. And they are hold forth, expound, declaim, preach, lay down the law, sound off, spout off, dogmatize, sermonize, moralize, lecture, and a few more. Now, how can we use this in our stories? Many times in real life, there are people who think they know better overall, or they know better for you. So you can have an annoying character that pontificates. The other can listen and get in they can listen to the advice and get in a mess, or they can ignore the character. If they ignore the character, will that character take matters into his or her own hands and make things worse? Since you didn't do that, I'm going to go tell them blah, blah, blah. You get the idea. Will that character secretly hope the others fail since they didn't listen to him or her? These are your choices. I say all the time, writing is fun. And this is why we have an infinite amount of choices. Watch people. People watch. People listen. See how people relate to each other. And take the different aspects of different people and put them in your stories. Leave a comment on if you know a person in your life who pontificates. You don't need to name him or her. But you could say what they pontificated about. Now, in MASH, Frank Burns often tried to pontificate. But even though he was a superior officer, his surgery skills were lacking. So the other characters didn't listen or told him to shut up. Leave a comment on a character in a show, book, or movie who pontificates and say, do the other characters listen or do they not? Now, our next term is propagate. Propagate means to breed specimens of a plant or animal by natural processes from the parent stock. Okay. Unless your story is about farming, I think we'll move on to the second definition. The second definition is to widely spread and promote an idea, theory, etc. There is a third definition with reference to motion, light, sound, etc. But we will stick with the second definition. Some synonyms for this definition are spread, disseminate, communicate, pass on. Before Columbus sailed the ocean blue, people propagated the idea that the earth was flat. And there are still people today that believe the earth is flat. With this example, we can assume that propagation is not necessarily true ideas or true theories, but it could be. In real life, there are a lot of people propagating in real life today. There are people propagating keto, paleo, vegetarian, vegan. There are doctors who propagate taking drugs is what we need to do for health. Don't worry about the diet. Just take these drugs. It was right. There are people propagating that Americans landed on the moon. 1969, the year I was born. While others say there is a radiation field around the earth that humans don't have the technology to pass through and live, that radiation would be detrimental or deadly. So if that's true, we couldn't have possibly landed on the moon. I'm not a scientist or an astrologist or anything close to that. But I am a writer. I can listen to both sides. And I can incorporate one side or the other in my writings. When we write stories, they are our creations. That means that they are what we want them to be. If you write science fiction, then surely you want us to have landed on the moon in 1969. And now we can populate Mars or Saturn or fly to other galaxies. I don't write nonfiction. I write fiction. I create worlds from my adventures. The story unfolds as I imagine things. So our characters can propagate whatever, and we can decide whether or not it's true in our story with our setting. It doesn't have to be true in real life. It can be. It doesn't have to be. Of course, the most important thing is to have fun. Now, think of the Men in Black. Everyone propagated that aliens weren't real, and the Men in Black worked hard to erase people's memories of alien encounters. They had that little thing they put on their little sunglasses and erase what was true in that story. It doesn't matter if there's aliens walking among us, citizenless humans right now. It doesn't matter. What was true in that story? What was propagated wasn't true. And we said no such thing as aliens. That's what was propagated in the story. And in that story, it wasn't true. So there was a secret society. And the danger to Earth was totally unknown by the majority of Earthlings. And that's where they had their story. And they had to, make sure people didn't remember. And they had to, figure out how they were going to erase memories and all that stuff. So what they propagated wasn't true. And so they had to make the illusion that it was true. And then secret societies can be a fun thing to create. Leave a comment on a show, book, or movie where the character has propagated something and tell if it was true or false in the story. I don't care about real life. We're not writing nonfiction here. You might be writing nonfiction, but this channel is more 99.99999% of fiction. Not true, not real, not happening. So, in the story, was it true or false? It doesn't matter if it's true or false in life. Now, our last term is profundity. Profundity means deep insight, great depth of knowledge or thought. It also means great depth or intensity of a state, quality, or emotion. And finally, it means a statement or idea that shows great knowledge or insight. Some synonyms for the first meaning are wisdom, intelligence, sagacity, acuity, depth, perceptiveness, penetration, thoughtfulness, sapience, and several more. The synonyms for the second meaning are intensity, depth, extremity, severity, keenness, or strength. The first two definitions are similar in ways with the great depth of intensity. But the first is an unknowing way, great knowing. And the second is a state, quality, or emotion. And a state could be knowing. So the definitions are very intertwined there. Now, in our stories, we can have a sage who knows many things, like Yoda. We can have an expert who has a deep knowledge of a subject. In Stargate, Daniel had profundity concerning ancient languages, but Samantha Carter had profundity concerning technology and how it worked together. In the Big Bang, profundity about many things, but not necessarily about social situations. So you could have a colonel or a general that has great profundity about war strategy, but you could have a private that has great profundity about weapons, which weapon shoots the farthest, which weapon has the most damage, which weapon used in close combat, which weapon, all those kinds of things that you can know. You use these night glasses and you use it, so that you can have people with great profundity in different areas. Not necessarily just knows everything about the whole entire universe. Now, if you were going with intensity of emotion, then think of shows like Fear Factor or horror movies. Of course, intense emotions don't have to be fear. They can be anger or joy. You can have an intense sickness, since sickness is a state. I am legend. And the disease. That's very intense. Leave a comment on a show, book, or movie where the character has profundity in either sense. Okay, writers, we don't have a writing prompt today, so go write your chapters and make sure to meet your writing goal. Leave a comment on what your daily goal or daily average is and how well you've kept that so far this year. I have my goal of an average of 500 words per day, which is what I have pretty much every year. And as of this writing, I have an average of 617 words per day. So I'm on target, which I wasn't at the beginning of the year, but now I'm on target. Some days I go to work, and I'll go to a Squares workshop, don't have time to write it all, and then I might sit down the weekend and drop 2,000 to 3,000 words down, so that covers me for several days. So at this point, and I am reading this March 21st, so that's why I was talking about Pisces and tomorrow and Aries. You didn't know that. I don't know when this video will drop, but as of the end of March, I am on target. Join me Friday for Elodie's Pride, Gaining Freedom, Chapter 23. Join me Tuesday for a little jargon and part 23 of your cave stories. Don't forget to visit our website, bymckella.com. Read some character bios. Send your writings and chapters to writewithmckella@gmail.com. If you hit like and subscribe and the bell, then we will continue to write together, and other people will have a higher chance finding this video and this channel, since your likes will push the video out to a greater audience. Thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate your participation. If you know someone who would like this video, please share with them. This is McKella with Write with McKella. Bye for now.